Major League Baseball, America's favorite pastime, immortalized in films like A League of Their Own and Field of Dreams.
The one constant through all the years, Ray, has been baseball.
All too often, another constant has been baseball players using tobacco, especially chewing tobacco, a known cause of cancer. It's what led to the early death of Hall of Famer Tony Gwynn, who died in June of cancer in his salivary gland, a diagnosis Gwynn blamed on chewing tobacco. Baseball great Babe Ruth, also a longtime chewer, died of oral cancer. Now, 9 major public health organizations are pushing Major League Baseball to ban all tobacco use by players and staff at games and on camera to honor Gwynn's memory. They sent this letter to MLB Commissioner Bud Selig and Players Association Chief Tony Clark, calling on them to set the right example for America's kids.
Kids see their heroes on the field, and they want to emulate and be just like their favorite slugger or their favorite pitcher.
According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, smokeless tobacco use not only increases your risk of several types of cancer, it's also responsible for heart attacks and strokes, even leading to sudden death. And in recent years, minor league baseball has been cracking down on players caught using smokeless tobacco, levying fines on players and team owners of up to $1,000.
People know that they could get caught at any time, and it's a major fine. I mean, it's not just, like a speeding ticket fine.
When we first approached minor league baseball, it was almost like they were waiting for someone to reach out and try to forge this kind of partnership.
The minor league crackdown comes as the Food and Drug Administration was looking at ways of discouraging teenagers, particularly white males in rural areas who are more at risk of taking up the habit.
Because smokeless tobacco use is so culturally ingrained in rural communities that 10-year-old, 11-year-old, 12-year-old boys, they see their dads dipping or chewing, older brothers, uncles, leaders in the community.
And where Madison Bumgarner says that he has been dipping since he was in 5th grade, which would lead one to believe that he's probably never played a baseball game without that. And now he's going to have to. And you've been very outspoken on this topic. What are your thoughts?
Well, I don't know. A lot of guys that dip don't dip. I never dipped when I pitched.
You didn't.
It wasn't good for you.
Mm-hmm.
It was went against everything you wanted to do to perform. So, listen, I have been on the other side of this, and so, I'm not going to tell people, and I said this when I came out of my radiation and my chemotherapy, I'm not going to tell people not to do it. I'm just going to tell you what happens when you do. And it's not, there's no ambiguity, there's no gray area. If you do it and you don't stop, you're eventually going to get cancer of the mouth, of something, and it's exactly like smoking in the sense that I think anybody and everybody that did either that suffered from the effects you eventually suffer from would go back and probably change that decision if they could.
And so I'm really curious, though, to hear your take on how players will perform without it, because...
Well, I think it depends. I don't know. Well, I would probably argue there's as many that don't do it when they play as they do. I mean, I know a lot of football guys, Chris. I don't know how many guys in the NFL did it, but I know a lot of NFL guys. I've seen a lot of them do it off the field. I've seen them do it, in meetings or whatever. I don't know how many do it on the field. Mm-hmm. Because, like I said, it's not something that helps you perform. In fact, it's probably the opposite in many ways from a dehydration perspective and all the other stuff. But, I couldn't play with it. I never did it when I pitched. I couldn't do it when I pitched. But so I can't answer how it's going to affect those guys. I know I went through withdrawal. I had to go into the hospital during my radiation and my chemo and be admitted to the hospital to actually quit because it was just an addictive habit I couldn't stop. And I would tell you this, I went through a week of my life in the hospital that I remember very vividly, all these events that happened that actually never happened. I went through detox for about a week coming off of chewing tobacco, and it was a week of my life that's gone forever, but I remember distinctly everything that happened, and none of it ever did. So, it's powerful. There's no question about that. And the thing that gets to me is the government's not infringing on you, right? The government's telling you, or the local government's telling you, you can't do this. It's on this property. It's not stopping you from dipping. It's not, but the only way this sticks, the only way this works in the big leagues is if they levy a financial fine that hurts, or they have some sort of penalty system that affects the game or your status in the game. Otherwise, it's going to be toothless.
My dream was to be a professional baseball player, as a lot of young kids is. When I associated baseball back then, I associated it with that can in the back of the pocket. And I always wanted to know what that can was. What did that represent, that can? Was that the difference between me getting there? So by seeing that and seeing how successful these guys were in the limelight, living on a ranch and seeing most of the guys at the ranch hands chewing, everywhere I looked, what I thought was a real strong man and what I saw was a real positive role model on the baseball field was that can. And after several lesions were taken that we discussed, finally someone did the correct test at Stanford, and they did a dye test. And they figured out that there was something wrong.
A cancerous tumor had developed inside Bob's lip in the exact same spot where he had held his spit tobacco since he was 13 years old. While researchers are still investigating spit tobacco and the various forms of oral cancer that it causes, it would be difficult to convince Bob that something else caused his cancer.
I can still remember being wheeled in that day. It's the scariest moment in the world, knowing they're going to take, part of your face off. It's kind of dishumbling.
Radical surgery was necessary to remove the tumor. The operation took 14 hours. Bob lost his chin, his bottom teeth, and bottom gums. Unfortunately, the surgery was not in time to stop the cancer. A second diagnosis in December of 1996 revealed that the cancer was spreading.